Welcome. Thank you for joining. We are a Dutch parent company. We're based in Holland. That's where I live when I'm not at our subsidiary, which is a wholly owned subsidiary in Macedonia. We're a cultivator. We've been cultivating for 5 years right now, and we just started extracting last year as well. What I'd like to speak about is, I'm just giving you the background of sort of who we are, but what I'd like to speak about is more the opportunities in Europe, and I'd like to bring it out as a discussion. I'm looking forward to having questions afterward, hopefully, and then at the roundtable we can discuss in more detail. I didn't want to sort of waste your time with our marketing presentation. I think I recognize a lot of faces in the room. Most people know who we are, so I won't get into details on that. But I'd just like to explain how I see the European opportunities, how we see the market over here. We see it as not very crowded, a lot of great companies, good atmosphere, and it's a great time to get into the market right now. And I think from our point of view, my point of view, and speaking with investors, it seems like this is the opportunity right now in the global cannabis industry in terms of growth opportunities, good timing to get in, it's not crowded, etc. I was at a conference last week in Berlin, and one of the investors said it was a conference with a lot of the larger companies from Europe. I'd say most of the bigger ones from Germany, Switzerland, some from UK, etc. All around basically. And his point was, these are the companies that are here right now. These are the companies that have been working for the past 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And these are the companies that you should get to know. These are the companies that you should invest in. These are probably going to be the winners of tomorrow, whether we move toward a recreational model in Europe or a medical model. The US market has been interesting compared to the European market. We look to the US, we've always looked to the US. I'm from Boston originally. We've always looked to the US for technologies, for experience, etc. And I think it's been great in that sense up until now. And now most people, when they talk about the US, they're focusing on the companies, the listed companies. And as you probably have noticed, or maybe not, over the past couple of years, they've dropped. The stocks have dropped dramatically over the past, let's say, 2.5 years. And I think a lot of it was just an exaggeration of when they're going to legalize. And I'm talking a full federal legalization. I think when Biden was coming into office, because he hinted that he was pro-cannabis, people thought that he was going to legalize, and they pushed the story, similar to Germany last year, pushing the recreational story. In the US, most of the companies, as Biden was coming into office, were assuming that it was going to be a full legalization. The stocks ran up, and now they've come off quite a bit since then. So you had a bit of an exaggerated push, and then also in the US, you've got, it's still basically a gray market. It's state legal, federally illegal, as you already know. But when you go a little more granular into the situation in the US, it's very overregulated, it's overtaxed. A lot of the companies in cannabis are getting taxed at a 65% rate, and it's hard for them to make actual money. So the question is, when does that change? And unfortunately, the majority of people that I speak with don't see that coming anytime soon. Cowen, for example, that was the conference I was at last week. They see it not happening before 2030, which is, it sounds insane, but when you see how slow things work, it may make sense. Maybe we have some sort of a fluke. Maybe Biden legalizes. If he's going to run again, his ratings are low. Maybe he legalizes just to get a bit of a push on that side. I think that's a big maybe. Otherwise, you really don't see any progress. You see the U.S. government basically ignoring the medical benefits of cannabis. Many legal businesses are throwing in the towel. So you've basically got the government thinking, okay, this is great, we're taxing them at 60%, and the businesses are trying to hold on as long as they can, and then they're just throwing in the towel, like I said. So it doesn't last forever, and I don't think the governments realize that. You've got robberies of the dispensaries, robberies of the deliveries. You can't insure the deliveries. For instance, in the last presentation, talking about the you need to insure your deliveries. It's just normal. It's just normal business. So when we ship from Macedonia, we go by plane. By the way, I heard the stories on the driving, and it's, I think it'd be silly to try to drive out of Macedonia, but The interesting thing is you compare to the US, where it's federally illegal, and Europe, where we're just shipping a federally legal product. We have the top logistics companies, the top airline companies moving our products. Everything's insured, everything's monitored, etc. So it's a very different viewpoint from this side. And the funny thing is, when you speak with investors in the US, a lot of them don't even realize that it's legal in Europe. You get questions like, "Oh, really? You guys legal over there?" And it's surprising because the US has been such a focal point, and they just sort of look inside their own market and don't really look internationally. And now, because you've had this stagnation of the US industry, investors are starting to look globally. The companies are starting to look globally, and the investors as well. I think in the US, another reason why it's going to be delayed a bit longer is you've just got a bigger push and a larger lobby from the pharmaceutical companies. A lot of the government officials don't want to push it forward. The IRS isn't incentivized at all. They just see this as sort of a gold rush that's going to last forever. They don't really look granularly into the companies that are having trouble, struggling at a 65% tax margin. So there are reasons that it's delayed there, and there aren't many reasons to see a legalization anytime in the near term. Looking at the valuations, sometimes you'll hear investors say, "Oh, I can buy U.S. company for this valuation; it's very cheap, etc." The problem is that it may be a value trap. You may have a cheap company, and then you're just going to sit in that company for a very long time, waiting for some sort of change, waiting for some sort of catalyst that's going to move it forward. So even though it's cheap, you may hold a cheap stock for 2 years, you may hold it for 5, you may hold it for 10 years, and it's going to be good value. But the question is, when does it tick up? When do you get that big run? And it is cheap, and looking back after the legalization happens, it will be a good play depending on how long you wait, but it's going to take time to get there. So moving over to Europe, the Germany legalization, let's call it, or liberalization, for me, I think it's great news. It's enormous. It's definitely a letdown from what we expected last year. You had a lot of companies that were sort of pushing the full legalization, looking just like the US or Canada in the legal sense, where you can open grows all over Germany, etc. A lot of companies were raising on that. And planning big projects, etc. So clearly this has been a letdown, I think, on this side as well. We had a little bit of a push too far, where people were looking at the blue sky outcome more than anything else, and that doesn't always happen, as we know. But in general, the fact that they legalized, or they're about to legalize, it looks like 25 grams of personal carry, that for me is just enormous. Just stepping back and thinking, okay, where were we, let's say 5 or 6 years ago when I moved into the industry? Did we expect that? I didn't. So for me, it's a pretty big move. It's in the right direction. I think the negative part is that you're pushing cannabis users toward illicit growers, or you're pushing it toward the medical market if that liberalizes, and it's hard to say which way it goes. Local cultivation in Germany, I see, is taking a very long time. One country to look at is Holland, that's doing a similar pilot program. We don't know what the pilot program is going to look like over here. Maybe we'll get an announcement in the fall, but it takes time. It takes time to set those up. It takes time to receive all the applications, to find the locations, to build out the locations, build out the teams, etc. So I don't see that happening anytime soon, meaning this year or next year. It doesn't look like there's going to be supply entering the market. Therefore, that's why I'm thinking it's going to come from the illicit side or the medical side. The social clubs, I don't see as a serious business proposal to anyone probably in this room, anyone with a business. It's just it doesn't seem like it's well thought out. Possibly it's to move the legacy growers over to the social side, but what legacy grower is going to move over to the social side to run a non-profit? I don't see that happening. This whole 500 members, they're going to fund it, they're going to work there like it's a kibbutz. I don't see that happening at all. So we'll see where it goes, but I just don't see that as the professional side of the business. And then the actual licenses that are supposedly going to be giving out throughout Germany, it's going to take a while to set up. And even when it is set up, it's difficult to see those expensive growers competing with the rest of the growers, whether they're in Europe, whether they're coming from Colombia, wherever it is in the world, Africa, for example, Macedonia, wherever they're coming from, they're still going to be competing with these German growers because they can compete through the medical market, as we know. So you've got the main drivers of the business, of course, are salaries and electricity. Germany right now has a crazy high electricity prices, as we know. Okay, it won't last forever, but at the moment it's very high. The average salary in Germany is about 5 times the average salary in Macedonia. It's about 2 times the average salary in Portugal, and that makes a difference because that average salary drives through to all of the other input costs that go into growing. As I said, the electricity, because they're probably going to be mostly indoor growers, and then the labor. So looking at the possibilities of success for the local growers is going to take them time to set up, and then when they do, the question is how are they going to compete with the international supply, whether it's illegal or not. So it's going to be interesting to see how it moves forward. I'm surprised at where it is right now because looking, let's say, couple months, 6 months ago, it looked like the Germans were doing a good job looking internationally, comparing different markets, comparing the best opportunities for Germany, etc. And in the end, it looks like they just sort of said, oh, okay, what's Malta doing? Let's do something like Malta, and then we'll talk about the rest of it later. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but we'll see. Maybe it gets better. Let's hope. In general, what I see from the investor side is European investors have been very slow to get into the cannabis space. I was in London a couple weeks ago. They had the Cannabis Europa, and it was sort of bipolar. You'd have some people on the investment side that were saying it's horrible, everything's bad, everyone's negative, etc. And then you had other people that were showing up at the conference looking for opportunities, or people looking to get into the space. So I think if you're going back to the same investors who have been in cannabis, whether they were in Canada early or the US early, etc., especially if they're on the listed companies, I mean, they just got shattered through these crashes, and most of them are not going to come back anytime soon. But in Europe, you've got vast amounts of family offices, of high net worth individuals. You've got the institutional investor side that's basically risk off, but from my point of view, you've always got the high net worth investors, and I don't mean retail investors that are going to put in 50,000 or 100,000. You've got a lot of investors in Europe that aren't in the space. They're looking for new opportunities. They have liquid capital to invest, and they're not going to be enormous. They're going to start with $500,000 or $1 million or something like that, but a lot of them will start with something small and then they'll add to it later on. That's where we've had our success over the years. We started off with about 5 or 6 of us in 2017, and in 2020 we added about 6 investors, all ultra high net worth. We have one private equity firm, but it's really the owner of the private equity firm was my boss when I was at a bank. So it's really him as a private investor, even though he's a billionaire. So for us, with the private investors, I think it's an untapped market that we've seen success with. That's why I'm explaining it here and talking about it, because I think there are a lot of people that would like to hear more about the space, that would like to learn more about the space, that would like to hear more about these opportunities, and they're good investors. They're not like sometimes you'll get a private equity investor or venture capital investor who wants to come in and just take the wheel. They want to take control. They want to make the decisions. They want to take you where they want to take the investment. And most of them are looking for a liquidity event. So they're looking to get in. They want to sell the company, go public, or whatever it is, to liquidate their position, make the gains, and move on. And that may be a good idea, maybe a good approach at certain times, but maybe not all the time. So I find that with high net worth investors, they're very interested, they follow very closely, they like to get involved, but only when you need them to get involved. For instance, if you go to them for advice, they're happy to give it, but they're not stepping over the line and trying to control the company, which I think, at least talking to other people with companies, it's very frustrating when you have that, when you have a lot of investors pulling your arms in different directions and trying to force you in taking different paths and different strategies. So in Europe, I think the way to look at it, the way we see it, is that it's federally legal. there's of course there's the illicit market, but it's not investable. You've got registered companies, registered shareholders. We were looking at some investments in the United States in 2016, and you'd hear things like, well, you can't invest in the company, but you invest in this random company over here and we'll loop you in later. Just things that didn't make any sense. So in Europe, you've got very straightforward investment opportunities. You've got dialogues with authorities and the companies, working things out, working relationships, listening to each other, helping each other move more smoothly, even though it takes time. It's happening. You've got testing systems here that can't be circumvented. If you look at what's happening in the US, etc., there's a lot of exaggeration on the testing, etc. In Europe, you don't have that. So you basically get companies that are running legitimately, that are getting tested, and that are putting clean products on the market, which is a big difference from a lot of other markets. When looking at these companies, what I've seen from the investor side is that they're not great at due diligence. If you've got a high net worth investor, they look at companies, but they invest a lot on the personal relationship. They'll meet someone and say, okay, I like that guy, I'm going to invest in him. And I think especially in the cannabis space, it's not the way to go about investments. You really need to dive deep. And I think with some investors that are on the smaller side, I just say to them, it's better that you go into a fund rather than trying to find out about a company and learn everything about it, do the background checks on the people, talk to people in the market. They just don't have the capability to do it. And a lot of the funds out there they're specialized. That's what they're there for. And there are a lot of great companies they have funds set up, they're dedicated toward the space, they've got teams doing the due diligence, they do the background checks correctly, they're talking behind the scenes, asking people, do you know the company, do you know the manager, do you know the other people in the company? Let's dig deeper is what I'm trying to say from the investment side, because then if they don't, then you've got all these stories where people are saying, oh, I invested in this company and they did this and they exaggerated, they lied, all this stuff. It's like, okay, well, did you really do the work that you should have done to get into it? And I think the answer in a lot of cases is no. They just threw a couple bucks. Oh, I'll invest 50,000 or 100,000, and for them it's small, but when it's gone, it's gone. And that's unfortunately has happened to too many people over here. Another thing that I find is that investors are looking for the next Google. So you'll hear investors in the space talking about, okay, who's going to be the next Google? Who's going to take the entire market? This or that? And I don't think it's going to be like that. I see the industry more like a beer industry in the U.S. just because that's what I can talk about where I'm from, where you have your craft brewers, you've got your mainstream brewers, you've got all these different levels, but you've got tons of opportunities. I think Germany is the same way, except all your beer is good. In the US, we haven't gotten there yet. We've got the shitty beers, and then you've got the craft and the specialties and things like that. But I think cannabis is going to be similar like that, where you've got different people doing different things in other countries, in other product lines. You're going to have different brands, etc. And I find that a lot of people are fixating on who's going to be the winner, what is the only side to invest in. We get a lot of flack from the cultivation side, where people say cultivation is commoditized. Maybe it is, maybe it will be. It's hard to say. I don't see it that way. And most people that I know that work on a cultivation or who have visited cultivations, and visited meaning deep dives into the cultivation, would probably argue that point, especially on the medical side, where you've got so many barriers to entry, and the testing standards, etc. You've got a lot of hurdles to get through before you're going to have a full success story. The legal structure is really important as well, especially because in Europe you've got different countries, different laws, different tax laws, etc. So that's a good way to tell if the company is serious when you're investing in the company. What's the legal structure? What work have they done on the jurisdictions, on the tax structure? How are they getting the dividends back? How are they taxed, etc.? And that sort of gives you an idea about how the managers think, how the executive team is thinking, how they're setting up the company, whether they're planning ahead. And I think the medical, at least on the cultivation side, the the medical cultivation side, planning is more important than you'd ever imagine. Planning and planning and planning, and make sure that you know what you're producing, how you're going to get there, how you're going to, how your flow of work is going to happen, where are your bottlenecks, etc. And a lot of companies, they don't take the time to do it because they're in such a rush to get things started up, or they think, okay, well, let's do it faster. We'll just bring in a consultant who's going to whip it up for us. And it may look good, but when you start using it, that consultant team is gone, and your team is sitting there saying, why did they do it this way, or why did they do it that way? So it almost gives them a free get out of jail card where they can blame it on somebody else because the cultivation or processing area was set up incorrectly, and they blame it on somebody else. So planning, I think, is key. Look at the team, how they're planning, etc. Diversification as well. I talk to people who they say, I'm invested in this company, and they're happy with that. They have one company, and you'd never do that. You'd never move into an emerging market and invest in one company. You'd put together some sort of a diversified basket. You'd spread it out, whether you're spreading out from different countries or different industries, etc. You do the same. So I think that's a good way to look at this industry as well. Is think about diversification. Try to spread out your bets. You never know what's going to happen, especially over the past few years with COVID, with the war, etc. These are things that weren't on anybody's radar, and you never know when you're going to get a force majeure event or an act of God that completely takes down one of your investments, or at least delays them. So that's why diversification can be helpful. Sorry to delay. The other thing is that in this space, I was at this conference that I keep talking about in Germany. One of the investors, Will Mweki, who I think he was going to speak here, I'm not sure if he showed up, but great fund manager, great speaker. And one thing he said, he sort of congratulated everyone on the co-opetition. And he said, it's nice to come over here and see people getting along, comparing ideas, hanging out, grabbing a dinner, grabbing a beer, and chatting. And I think that's the interesting thing with Germany right now, is or Europe in general. It's a small market. People know each other. People are getting along. It's nice to see, and I hope it continues that way. And from what he was saying, it wasn't that way at all in Canada. It was really cutthroat, and people were doing things that you'd never imagined. So it's sort of nice to see people moving along together. Even though there is competition, they're good about it, and I think they're mature in that sense, which is great to see. The way I see it is you've got a lot of good companies here. The cake is large enough to go around for everybody. There's plenty of room. It's not a crowded market, and the best company is going to prevail. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to do well here, but there's plenty of room for great companies. So it's nice to see that sort of camaraderie, I'd say. Another thing to talk about is the the team. When I speak with large investors that are either at banks or at investment funds, etc., they're looking for teams that have operators on the team. For example, people who can roll up their sleeves, get things done. They're not afraid to get work done. And that's the reality with this industry is it's very entrepreneurial. So if you look at what the companies are moving toward, of course, it's a professional company, but in the beginning, it's just entrepreneurial, and people need to do what needs to be done. And it's hard to find people with that mentality. A lot of people have their mindset, what's my job description? That's what I'm here to do. That's all I'm going to do. And you've got to find the people that are willing to put in the effort, putting the time, the dedication, etc. The other thing to watch out for is we hear a lot of stories from our service providers of companies that are getting kickbacks. So you'll literally have the founder or the CEO or the manager who's requesting a kickback from the guy who's building out his facility or doing this or that, which is, it's insane to see it, because when you look at these managers, they're already investors in the company. So it's hard to see them being so short-sighted, but the amount that it happens, and we've seen it in other markets as well, in Canada, now we've seen it a couple times over in Europe. So that's really important, to look at the team. Who are you investing in? Do you know them? Do you trust them, etc.? What's the recourse if something does happen? Another thing, when you've got these companies from whether it was Canada, now you've got the US companies moving in. Almost every large Canadian company was over here. Most of them have retracted back. And what I saw is you had senior executives moving over here from Canada, not moving, visiting over here from Canada, showing up, writing a check, saying this is what I want done. I'm back in 6 months. They come back, nothing gets done, and you've got to disconnect between that senior group and the people on the ground that are working. And I think that's why a lot of those companies failed, closed their grows, overdeveloped, took the wrong paths, etc. So I think that's one thing to look out for is who's making the decisions with your companies, who's making the plans, where are they putting the money, and who's following up on what's happening on the ground. Don't rush into any deals. I see a lot of people that say, okay, I had to jump in. I had this opportunity. Take your time, whether it's investing into a company or with some of the people in the room with the deals that you're doing. Make sure that it's the right deal for you, and you take the time to get to know your partners and make sure that the goals are aligned with both of them. One way that we run the company is just the KISS acronym. Keep it simple, stupid. A lot of times people try to overcomplicate everything, and sometimes it's better just to keep it simple and move forward one step at a time. And the other thing that I'd like to end with is patience and persistence in this industry. If I look back at the amount of letdowns this industry has sort of put in front of me, the amount of times people have told me to give up on certain things, or don't do this or don't do that, and we just kept sort of persevering and moving forward. It takes a lot of sort of grit to move through the hurdles, and that's probably what we're going through right now with this new German announcement. Where do we head? What do we do? If we raised money that was going to go to a certain area, where is that going to go? And the idea is just to believe in the industry, move forward with it, know that we're all going to move forward together, but it may not be a straight line, and it may not be exactly how you expected. So just keep positive and be persistent. Thank you very much for your time.